You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. Today, we're talking with someone who's earned almost $500,000 on the pro fishing tours. He's been in top fives and top tens, and he's from right here in Mississippi. Pete Pons on the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast today.
This episode of the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast is brought to you by the Foundation for Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. And today, fishing, big time fishing. In fact, and I mean big time when I talk Larry Pugh, fisheries biologist, deputy director at MDWFP. But between us here, Pete Pons, pro fisherman from right here in Mississippi. Pete, it is a real pleasure to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, man. I tell you, I always enjoy getting to talk to you guys, and it's just a pleasure.
Well, I'm a big fan. Larry, you're a big fan too, I know.
A huge fan, yeah, no doubt. And when we started talking about a concept or an idea for a podcast, first person I thought of was Pete, and I texted him. He said, man, I'd love to do it. So I'm excited about all the things we're going to talk about today.
Now, how long have y'all known each other?
I was going back thinking, we first, probably 20 years.
He pulled me over one time and gave me like 7 or 8 tickets at one time. And I'm picking at you. I know you do.
You know, we tried to film some on Barnett several times, and that was probably 20 years ago, 15 or 20 years ago.
Okay.
And just stayed in touch and you know.
Yeah.
I don't even remember filming on that with y'all, but I do remember, Scooter and a couple of the camera guys and getting to meet those guys, and I really enjoyed that type thing. You'd be surprised how many times that you get with a camera person and y'all become friends. You know?
Right, sure. Now, and Pete, Mississippi's home for you, right?
Yes.
Give me a little bit of that background where things kind of started for you in fishing.
Well, in fishing wise, Mississippi, we came here because my dad was in the Air Force, and then he got out of the Air Force, and they actually picked Ross Barnett as it was being impounded. And, and that's how it all started. But Daddy didn't carry me fishing as much as I would like, and I think I had a desire. And I was always the guy that said, I can do it, and I don't care what. And then if it's a brick wall, you just keep pushing at it, and you're finally going to knock it down. Mm-hmm. And so to make a long story short, I was bound and determined to be a professional fisherman, and I learned very young in life that anything that you wanted, you had to really work at. And so I was working at United Parcel Service right out of school, and I couldn't get enough time off. And so I ended up hurting my hand, and a little controversy there. I actually threw an anchor out, and I let the anchor rope slide through my hand. Hook went into my left hand and stuck in past the fingers, past the barb into my fingers. Of course, Daddy was in the boat. We grabbed anchor below it, pulled it up. That's a whole nother story. But I ended up quitting UPS, and then I realized there's not but 3 ways that you can fish professionally. You got to be independently wealthy. You have to have a lot of time off, or have self-employed. And I thought, well, I'll start a janitorial service, and I did. And I had a big janitorial service, but little did I know that it required a lot more time than I wanted to. So I'm up answering the phone under the console of the boat. Yeah, hello. and because people, for some reason, people in general, especially the guys that are working, that you're working for, they don't really want you to be out there in a boat. They want you to be working, So that's how it all started, And I just went from one thing to another. Ended up fishing Bassmaster Elite Series for several years. Then I switched to Major League Fishing. Of course, a lot of us moved over to Major League Fishing and fished the selects, which was where they weigh the fish and what you're seeing on TV now. And did that for a couple of years, and I thought I'd do really good at that. And boy, I tell you, it was a tough deal for me. A lot of pressure. I've never fished a tournament that had so much pressure on it. And then from there, I moved to FLW. And then once FLW got purchased by Major League Fishing, of course, I was fishing the Major League Fishing Invitationals. And now I'm fishing NPFL, National Professional Fishing League, which is a circuit in itself. About 2 years old.
I'm starting to hear one more about that. They're on Pickwick.
That's right. Fixing to go to
next couple of
Pickwick.
weeks.
Yeah,
I think.
that's right. And it's a good circuit. Those guys care. It reminds me of the old FLW days. Whenever you know, they really wanted you there.
I saw they changed their schedule,
They did.
the days they're fishing,
Yeah.
the times they're fishing, and I've never seen an organization do that on Pickwick or any body of water to accommodate. Oh, they're fishing with an emphasis in the afternoon.
Current.
Because Pickwick this time of year is the bite's so current oriented.
Yeah.
So I was pretty shocked that organization has been so accommodating to their anglers.
Yeah, but the one thing about them, they understand that we're their customer. I mean, the fishermen are their customer.
Yeah.
They can't do it without us.
Yeah.
And if we weren't paying that entry fee, then they wouldn't be there.
They wouldn't be there, yeah.
And so and they realize that. And some of the, and I don't know how long that's going to last, Larry, you know.
Yeah.
But I can say
right
this.
now it's doing good.
Yeah, they're very good organization to work for.
So, Matt, I was trying to think, and Pete's going to have to answer this question. The first time I really ever heard the name Pete Ponds, and I don't remember what year it was, but either you won or you were contending on Barnett. Now, I can't remember. Was it the 80s or 90s?
Son, I don't remember. That
did
had
you
to be
win
no. That was
it was a BASS tournament.
Yeah, it was an open tournament.
Yep.
And I remember being on stage with Ray Scott, and he said, "Pete, you led the dang thing for 3 days."
That's right.
2 days.
Yeah.
And he whispered in my ear. He said, "You led it for 2 days. We did the whole program with you, and you didn't win." I ended up coming in third.
Yeah.
Behind Mike McClellan won that, which he had just won. He won a back-to-back. So he won in Arkansas, and he won on Ross Barnett.
Yeah.
And then a guy named Stan Grzini, which Stan came in second, but everybody just kind of blew over Stan because of, I was in third, and then Mike had won back to back. So Stan kind of got treated like the red.
Do you remember what year that was? Close? Was it the 90s? Or was it before then?
No, it was in the 90s, late 90s.
I just remember
late 90s.
Hey, we were pulling for the local. That's what we were doing.
Yeah, it was so close. Oh, my goodness.
on the home pond, you know.
Yeah, and rarely can you do that.
Yeah.
It's just there's always something.
Yeah.
But I remember I was catching some fish on stumps with a crankbait, and one of the camera guys in the boat was kind of a friend of mine, and I just could not make it happen. I mean, I wanted it so bad, and you know how that is. You just can't. It's either going to happen or not.
Yeah.
When you win a tournament, usually it all just falls into place.
Yeah.
Did you have a moment in your early tournament fishing career that was sort of the seesaw moment that pushed you over the edge? Had it gone the other way, maybe things would be different, but it pushed you over the edge, and you thought, okay, I'm on my way. This is what I'm going to be a tournament fisherman for the rest of my life.
I'd already made my mind up, but I would say this: my dad pushed me into fishing that year, and that tournament probably stuck it in past the bar.
The one that he's mentioned.
Yeah, because I'd paid a $600 entry fee, at third place, won a Ranger boat, some cash to go with it. And I thought, my goodness, this is easy. This is, man, I got this. And of course, I'm going to win everything now.
Yeah.
It's not like that at all.
Right. Now,
Very few tournaments that you fish that you really have the opportunity to win. Yeah. You have to be, in the right position, and then have to know how to win. I mean, it's a different deal. Once you get there, it's different.
Different. Well, and I've mentioned this to Larry too, and I had just enough of a taste of it 20 years ago to get an appreciation for how tough it is.
Yeah.
And not just tough to actually accomplish it and catch the fish. I mean, tough with travel and racking up credit card debt and fishing when it's freezing cold and when it's brutally hot. And we grow up on television. We watch BASS on TV. They're all catching fish. Bluebirds are singing. It seems wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not at all what it's like.
No, it's not. I will say this. There is a lot of downtime. There's a lot of time that, when I say downtime, I don't mean relaxed time. I mean that you're emotionally down. When you think about it, you got 125 guys in the tournament. There's only one winner.
Yeah.
So 124 of you are going, dang man, what'd I do wrong? And so it's a tough sport. And countless days in the rain, cold, hot, preparation for it. But at the end of the day, did you enjoy it? And my answer is absolutely yes. And it's so rewarding when you do good. When you look out there, Matt, and you see all those people at the morning, your daylight, and you see all those guys, and you say, I beat every one of them. I got chills just talking to you about it. I still have that. I mean, I still have it. And I can't get rid of it. And I've had it all my life. Never been able to shake it. I'm telling y'all, I got chills from my legs to my, everything. It's
well,
just
when you quit getting that,
about it.
when you quit getting that, that'll tell you when it's time to quit
I
tournament
wonder
fishing.
when that's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, I want it to happen. I've tried to quit a couple of times and I can't.
One of the great things about bass fishing, a little bit like a sport like golf, in that it's not age restricted. That competitive streak's going. You can play, you can compete as long as you want to.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about Rick Klein earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget 50 years.
Yeah,
I
50
forget
years of
50
it.
years, and he's in his late 70s.
Yeah.
And I'm still listening to the podcast talking about what Rick Klein's doing and what he's focusing on. And I told my wife recently, 6 months ago when I quit getting excited when they call those boat numbers out.
Yeah.
Now I'm not talking about a race, but when I quit getting excited, when they quit, when they start saying boat number 1, boat number 2, is when I'll quit tournament fishing.
Yeah.
I don't get the butterflies like I once did.
Yeah.
At that moment that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I still feel the anxiousness.
Sure.
Wanting it to happen. If I catch them before in the pre-fishing, then I'm worried about them moving. If I don't catch them, then I'm worried about what am I going to do. It's a stressful deal, and it doesn't sound like it's fun, but it's truly fun. And not only that, the relationships. Like Rick Klein, he's a personal friend of mine. I can call him up right now and talk to him. And all those guys, and we're just like a big old bass club.
Yeah.
I can't say I can call New York to California to Florida to just about anywhere in the United States, and I have somebody that would come help me if I was in trouble. And that's the truth. I mean, it really is.
And your friends,
Yes.
Mr. Klein, y'all are friends. But if you're in the tournament, you want to beat him and he wants to beat you.
Absolutely. But it's a friendly competitor.
Sure.
It's not cutthroat. Now there are behind the scenes moments where you get in arguments. Me and Biffle, of course, Biffle got into it with everybody, and he probably wouldn't mind me saying this. Got into it a couple of times. That was probably my first one, a big one that I got into, and he probably doesn't even remember it. But we were on a lake, and it got kind of hairy, and he started screaming. I started screaming, and but they don't show that. And if they did, they'd probably make a lot more entertainment. But that goes on every single tournament.
Yeah.
I've had an interaction with Tommy Biffle. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I think,
in his defense, I asked Takahiro, and Takahiro and him were real close. Yeah. And me and Tak are real close too. And I asked Tak, I said, "What is his deal?" And he said he does that with everybody. Tak's Asian, And he said he does that with everybody. He okay. And so I got in a boat with Tak, and we were out there and we were watching Biffle, because he didn't get determined. Me and Tak didn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll go out there and follow the guys, find out what they were doing that we weren't doing, Yeah. And so and you have to kind of belittle yourself to do that. So I agreed to ride with Tak. Sure. I wasn't going to go in my boat because I didn't want everybody to know I was out there watching. But anyway, got up there and Biffle smarted off, said something to Tak like, "Don't get too close to us now." And Tak says, I said, "What?" That's when I said, "What is wrong with him?" And he's like, he just like that. He do that.
I was running a camera boat on the waterway in Columbus, and was following him, and he did the same thing.
Yeah.
You're getting too close. Stay out of my way. And
that's
vice versa.
Yeah.
Mark Davis.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the nicest.
There's all kind of personalities.
Look, we wasn't close enough for Mark Davis. He wanted the camera boat right there with him.
Yeah.
And we were on a first name basis after 3 days.
Yeah.
And it was just the whole realm of personalities. Kevin Van Dam, all business, didn't say a word, and I could barely keep up with him.
Yeah.
And he caught fish in places that I know fish didn't live. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But the different personalities that Pete's talking about, it was just all over
it's
the
so
board.
much fun. I remember, and I keep talking about Tommy, and Tommy and I are friends too. I'm not going to, and like I said, if he was here right now, it'd be no problem. But we were at Eufaula, Alabama. We fished a place called the Witch's Ditch, and most people are going to know where that is. And they had a culvert right there. It was pumping water out, and there was like 5 of us catching them on that culvert. And Tommy was way over to the left. He was way back there, and he was fishing down this bank. Mm-hmm. And we were all throwing, rattle traps and stuff up there, catching them out of that culvert, and we were almost sharing the water. And then they shut the water off, and all of a sudden you hear this voice. Y'all keep your tail over there. Don't be coming over here by me. You just stay over there. What you gonna do now? Huh? It was so funny. It was so funny. He was talking to everybody.
Yeah. Now, the state of Alabama was good to you. Is it Eufaula where?
I won a tournament on Eufaula.
Won the tournament there?
Sure did. Yeah. Alabama. I don't know. I like rivers. Uh-huh. And of course, I was raised on Ross Barnett, and we didn't fish upriver a lot, but when I did go upriver, it was pretty good. And because I lived on the other end of the lake, and of course, I fished down there, and we fished for schooling fish and ledges and all that kind of stuff. Mm. It was a lot of fun, but times have changed now, boys. I'm telling you. Yeah.
Before we move to the modern, looking back, top 5s, bunch of top 10s, bunch of top 20s on the pro tours in your career, all right at $500,000, just a hair under $500,000 in earnings. Yeah. What was fishing the Bassmasters Classic like for you? What was that experience like?
I was in awe at that point. I did know those guys. I knew every one of them. But it was an experience, a dream that I'd always wanted. Just to be there, I felt like was an accomplishment. And it was just the way you got treated was special. The first year I fished the Elite Series was a special time for me. They flew us into Disney World. They gave us a tour at night. They physically rolled a red carpet. They rolled the red carpet out. We stepped out of the bus onto the red carpet, walked down there. There are people on both sides applauding us like we were some kind of movie stars or something. Wow. It was a really good. So fishing for me has been so much, but to fish the first Classic was a dream come true. It was one of the goals that I had set, and I accomplished, and it was a lot of fun. It really was.
When you now look back at the early days, of what tournament fishing was like, and I know for you and your family, we can go back even further because your dad, he was in the first Bassmasters Classic.
That's right.
We told some of those stories. Mm-hmm. And then you fast forward to what it's like now. Yeah. Sort of this evolution of fishing from then until now. How do we start to kind of summarize what it has evolved into?
Well, it's still fishing. I don't care whether you're doing the forward-facing sonar deal or you're doing whatever. It's still fishing. It's still fun. It's entertaining because you're competing. You're trying to fool nature with a piece of plastic, not necessarily live bait. And live bait's good too. But you're getting to touch a world that you really don't have access to. And when you catch a fish, and I keep wondering, is it that I'm not catching big enough fish? Or I'm not catching enough fish. I don't know the answer to that myself, but something is making me want to keep doing it. I don't even know if I answered your question, man.
No, you did. I was going to ask you too about some of the specifics like boats. How are boats different? I recently got to fish with Larry. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest, nicest boat I think I've ever stood on. Yeah. I was scared to drop anything. I didn't want to damage it. It was so pristine. I thought, man, this is the way to go. Boats have come a long way, haven't they?
Yeah, and the price have gotten up there too. You're paying $100,000 for a dang boat, dude. Yeah. I didn't pay that much for my. I've heard this house. $100,000. I paid $60,000 for my first house.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm telling you, boats.
What have you seen change though, other than size? When I really started getting interested in bass fishing in the late '80s, an 18-footer with a 150 was all there was. That was top of the line. Yeah. Then in the '90s, you started seeing boats with 200s. Yeah. And then now 250s, 22-footers. Yeah. There's a boat out now that's 130 40,000.
Yeah.
You know, so
I'm sure but the norm is, you know, a 20 to 21 foot boat now. And
Yeah.
you need that whenever you're fishing lakes that get rough. And I know
Yeah.
Ross Barnett gets rough,
Yeah.
but, you know, not like Lake Erie, like Champlain,
Yeah.
you know, and so it depends on what region you're from as to what boat you need. But to answer your question, you know, we have depth finders. Not, you know, one depth finder is not enough anymore. You
Yeah.
got to have 2 or 3. And I've always resisted that. I've always tried to hold back on minimum.
Yeah.
I'd have one depth finder in my console and one up front, and things are changing so much now. But the seating in them have changed over the years. The padded
Storage,
deck, the
padded
storage.
deck,
You got
yeah.
dry storage, which you've never had before. And that's important. It doesn't sound like it's important, but when it rains, you know, and you go home and all your tackle's wet, you spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars on that tackle.
Yeah.
Then if it gets wet, then you got to throw it all out, lay it out, and you know you're tired and you get home, you don't do it, and so it ruins in there.
You know, one thing you've seen change, and I have too to some degree, is outboard technology.
Oh my goodness! It's just,
I mean, you know, whether it's whatever brand you choose to run,
yeah,
we've come so far in what I would call a relatively short amount of time. 4-strokes aren't new.
Mm-mm.
They've been in the small block business for 25 years. But now,
yeah.
And I mean, what kind of benefits have you seen with that?
Well, with Mercury, it's what I run, and I'm telling you, it's a great motor. I haven't had. You just don't have the problems that you used to have. You don't have to put oil in them. You change the oil in them, but much like you do your car, it's almost a thoughtless deal. But to think any of those motors, if you think about the amount of power that they're having to push with that prop, it doesn't calculate in my mind how it can lift a 2,000-pound boat, pick it up, and push it forward just with that little blade spinning behind it.
60, 65 miles an hour.
Yeah, 70, 75. You know, like some boats run a lot faster than that. But the average, and I think they're restricting it down. I honestly think that a lot of the manufacturings are choking their motors down just a little bit. And I know Bass won't go over a 250 for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They had a 150 limit, but they kind of set the bar on the horsepower. But you can buy a 500. You know, you buy a
300. I've seen boats with 300.
Yeah, but most people are running, 250s is about the max, and 65, 70 is about.
What's the fastest you've ever been GPS?
I'm on the water. I've been 100.
No.
Yes, sir.
100 miles an hour.
That was in a bullet, and that was on St. John's River down in Florida. And a buddy of mine was riding me just to show me that. Yeah. And but no,
I'd have pulled a cord on that one. I'd have pulled
There'd be a handprint on that handle over there. I was holding on to.
I'd have pulled the kill switch.
Yeah. But most of the time, for every give, there's a take. On those boats that run like that, they're not saying anything bad about them, but they're so thin hulled and light. That's why they perform like they do. So it's not really a fishing boat,
What was your first tournament boat and motor like? All those years ago.
Sprint.
I had a Terry Bass boat.
Come on.
I had a Terry Bass boat.
Length, it was
15, 16, I think. Had a 70 horsepower.
Okay. 16 foot with a 70 horsepower.
Yeah.
And now it's 21, 22 with a 250.
Yeah, with a Mercury 250 and no problems. I mean, I'm loving that. You don't even have to anybody can drive one of those boats, just about. But,
Power steering.
Yeah.
Hydraulic steering.
I remember when hydraulic steering
Me too.
came out. Yeah.
Me
Big
too.
deal.
That was huge with these big boats and how fast they would go.
Couldn't believe it.
It was unlike. I mean, I was shocked.
So the advances in the technology all over the place, and this may seem like a silly question, but we were talking earlier, I was bragging on Larry about casting accuracy and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Those years ago with bait cast reels and rods and reels and line and equipment, the advances in that, has it helped you to be a better fisherman? I
think so, especially with the rods. Some of the rods that we have now, I remember back in the day, All-Star rod was, when I first picked one up, I just could not believe it I was fishing lily pads and I'd set the hook and I was just dragging the lure across lily pads and I'm thinking it's fish.
And you can feel it.
It's so sensitive. And now they've if you picked up one of those rods right now, you'd think it was a piece of junk. You know, I mean,
Heavy.
Yeah.
I've still got some that I pick up and I'll go, I'm going to let somebody else stay with that.
Well, does it help you throughout? So the weight, for example, and the ease with making long casts, 8-hour day, you don't wear out. Physically, it helps you, right?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I think it depends on what you're throwing. If you're throwing a crankbait, like a deep diving crankbait, then or jerk bait where you're and you got to keep doing that. All day long, your forearm starts really hurting right there.
Okay.
But physical. I call fishing shape and physical shapes two different things. I can stand on a boat, on the deck of a boat for 16 hours, no problem. But you put me on concrete for 10 hours, my legs are killing me, and it's a difference. I don't know what it is, but it is a difference. So.
Well, I blame a lot of my shoulder issues on that freaking Alabama rig because we didn't have the right rod back in the day when it first came out. We were throwing it on a flipping stick, which was, and now you've got technique specific rods. Pete mentioned the jerk bait, a deep diving crankbait, an Alabama rig. There's rods you can go buy off the shelf that are made for those techniques that alleviate so much pressure on your elbow, your shoulders.
Right. So to answer Matt, you're probably right. It probably helps physically. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No.
And something like, the difference in the line. So you mentioned like fluorocarbon, braided line. You're talking about lily pads. I would think something like braided line, throwing a frog or, certain baits with that makes all the difference in your catch and land ratio.
100%, dude. I mean, I throw a vicious braid and it's called no fade braid, 65-pound test. And whenever I hang a fish back in like with a frog or something, there's no question that I'm going to get him in. I'm going to pull him through the stuff. It's not going to break. And back in the day, I remember before braid, when you hung one back there, you throwing 25-pound mono and it stretched. You're lucky to get that fish. You got 1 and 4 in.
I was trying to remember, Pete, when braid came out.
I don't
because we threw it on 25-pound mono, but I don't remember when we got braid. That we started fishing with, but we threw worms, jigs, frogs. We thought braid was a tool that we could use for every lure. And it took several years to figure out. It's pretty specific. Is what you need to use braid for.
It certainly is.
And
is it pretty specific to shallow stuff, top water, shallow stuff,
thick
or
cover.
no?
Thick cover.
I would say thick cover more so than shallow. Braid floats.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times when you're throwing baits that you don't like a crankbait, you wouldn't throw it on braid because it makes it go to the surface. Unless you're trying to fish shallow.
Yeah.
But not only that, the fish can see it. It's you can also have that argument. Boy, I'm fixing to be controversial right here because you take the Alabama rig and it's got wires running off of it, and you take braid and you're worried about, okay, what size line am I going to throw? I want to throw 8-pound fluorocarbon because I can't see it. And now all of a sudden you're throwing braid. So there's so many variables and so much technology has come around. I mean, that's a
So is that where fluorocarbon comes in? The old monofilament stretches. The braid, they can see it, but it doesn't stretch. Fluorocarbon kind of in the middle, they can't see it as well?
Fluorocarbon, they can't see it as well. It sinks. It's more dense, more sensitive, but it's like wire. I mean, it kinks up and rolls up, and then nobody likes it. If I were a fun fishing, just fishing, I'd throw vicious monofilaments. I throw. It reminds me of it's a limp line. It's not expensive. You can throw it long distances. It lasts a long time.
And I say the same thing.
Yeah.
We bought into the fluorocarbon. The guys that I fish with, and because it's so difficult to manage, you got to tie the right knot. Because if you singe it at all, it'll break on the hook set every time. And that was trial and error. So I guess when you come full circle, there's only specific things that I'll use fluorocarbon for. And other than that, we caught a whole lot of fish on mono. A whole lot.
Yeah. It seems to me when I'm in a tournament, I'm almost exclusively throwing fluorocarbon because I have that concern about the fish seeing the line. I want that one more bite. But if I'm not in a tournament, I a lot of times will use monofilament.
So outboard, other technology, trolling motors. I keep bringing up this fishing trip with Larry. And we were catching fish, Pete, and he's running a trolling motor. And then he'd catch one, and need to go retie or need to, step back and he would just hit a button on the boat and say, all right, step up there. And I didn't have to touch anything. The boat did it. It stayed and locked on the spot by itself. It was the most carefree, awesome thing.
Yeah, spot lock is amazing feature. It's a game changer.
Yes.
I mean, you can lock down on a hole if you got the batteries to support it. And we're talking about lithium batteries now. But you can stay there for hours. You don't have to have anchor anymore.
And it's a GPS thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's operating, keeping you on that spot.
That's correct. Yeah, it's an amazing. It's like I said, it was a game changer in the fishing industry. That and a couple other things have really changed everything.
Well, and speak to that a little bit for those listening that maybe have not been on the deck of a boat running a trolling motor with their foot for 8 hours in a tournament. Used to be, and I always remember that being such a tough deal and such an underrated part of like tournament, for really fishing at all, bass fishing, was boat control.
That's right.
And running it off 1 foot, and you get to the end of the day and your right leg's tired because you've been balancing on it all day. But this is solving a lot of that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's like putting the blinkers on in your car or the brake. You don't think about it. Once you spend that much time on the deck of your boat, you know what position your trolling motor's in, and but
subconsciously your foot almost knows what to do, and that's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Right.
Just running it, if I'm going this way, backwards, forward, it's almost a subconscious move, I would say.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Matt, that spot lock is a thing where you go to where you want to go and you push the button and you sit in that position. Now, if the wind's going to blow the back end of your boat around to wherever, your trolling motor head is going to stay in that position, but the back of your boat could be 20 feet off. So you have to orient your boat according into the wind or whichever. And sometimes a little breeze is better than a flat, no wind, because when it has no wind, the boat will tend to just circle around that, And so you'd be surprised how much your boat moves when you're not even aware that it's moving in a real light wind or something like that. You're catching fish, then all of a sudden you catch a few, and then it gets less, and you think they quit biting, and what happened is your boat just moved 30 feet to the left, and you weren't really aware of it because it's flat calm. But there's always current, and there's some type thing in there that moves your boat and makes you not, you got to really pay attention.
Sure. And in your boat, Larry, I think that was the thing that, and you had sonar we'll talk about later, all these different things, but the ability to just, with the GPS, tell it to stay there.
I've seen the changes. Pete's seen, my first big boat was the first 36 volt motor guide I'd ever owned. 3 batteries. Now, back then, that third battery was a cranking battery. We didn't know any better. So my 36 volt system was 3 batteries, but 2 deep cycle trolling motor batteries and a cranking battery. And but to have 36 volts that we knew we could go, never have to worry about a bad generally speaking, you don't have to worry about batteries. And so 36 volts in the mid 90s was a game changer. And then they started coming out with lift assists, and it was just the technology, the things that manufacturers were coming up with was rocking on so fast, and then spot lock came out. And boy, that was huge. Yeah. And so you start thinking what's coming out next. Well, Pete mentioned lithium batteries. So my boat has 4 batteries. Well, really 4.5 batteries. And I think I told you this. I've got 3 batteries for the trolling motor, a battery to run my outboard cranking battery. Then I've got a small lithium that I run all my electronics off of. But I'm interested now in the lithium technology, and I was hoping Pete may talk a little bit about that, because out of all the technological advances we've made, I keep waiting on that battery technology to take out 850 pounds out of the back of my boat, and I think we're there.
Oh yeah, no question. Lithium is kind of the wild, wild west right now in lithium companies, because they really don't have a lot of regulations, and there's so many different companies that are pumping that battery out and they're all saying they're the best. But they have apps now where you can see how much your lithium battery has in it, how whether it's being charged or whether it's not being charged, how much power you have. Is it 80%, 90%, whatever? It's so cool. But in the average tournament boat like mine right now, you've got, it's really overkill because I've got two 36s on one side of my boat, lithium batteries, and two 12 volts on the other side.
Okay.
So 136 would do it and 112 would do it. But when you pay $5,000 for an entry fee,
right,
you don't want a mistake when you get out there. My cranking battery, the two that I have are two 12 volts. One is 100 amp hour. The other, which is separate like Larry's, is running just my depth finders, my Lowrance depth finders. It's 170 amp hours, which means if I turn those depth finders on and I left them on, I could leave them on for 52 hours before the battery went out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so important to me.
Wow.
Because I know that I'm not going to have battery issues, And
what about the weight? That's what I'm always.
Well, I was thinking that too, because you mentioned the weight of yours.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, dude, I think those batteries are 25 pounds versus 65.
Is that right?
About
a third.
time.
Yeah.
It's about time we come up with better technology.
Yeah.
Over
It's so nice to reach back there and pick one of these batteries up, and you can do it without breaking your back.
Yeah, which I'm still breaking my back.
I tell you what's going on in that though, because the batteries are so light now. The guys that are using them, these boats were built for weight in the back. So some of the boats are having to adjust their performance boats are having to adjust what they got going on. I've got a friend of mine that's running a specific brand of boat, and I'm not going to call the name, but he has to fill his live wells up in order for his boat to perform like it normally would.
Where the weight's in the back.
Right, because all these years, the boat companies have built their boats, thinking that you're going to have, 150, 200 pounds in the very back end of it. And it's changed. It's changed the.
And is this trying to be too nitpicky or specific? But weight, like less 600 less pounds, comparatively over the course of a day. If you do a lot of riding, it makes a difference in gas consumption. Yes, no,
not enough. I'm gonna tell you that, of course, like we've already talked about, the 4-stroke engines make the different gas consumption.
Okay.
I mean, oh my goodness, it's night and day different. I mean. But what I think the lighter boat would help you with your whole shot, and it helps you probably run a little bit faster if the weight's adjusted right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So electronics. I don't even know where to start.
He's having a hard time keeping us on track.
No, it's okay.
No, I was hoping to get it. We're getting it all in,
Well, and we've already talked about it, in other conversations. But I say GPS. We just talked about it with a trolling motor standpoint, and that really, I guess, was the first big thing
for me. And Pete and I were talking about it earlier. And gosh, Pete's got so much more experience than I do. But you and I've talked on a previous podcast about the challenge I had learning to fish offshore and the people that helped me learn how to fish offshore. And I learned how to fish spots by triangulation. So we were lined up here on the bank with this in front, and that's how we got on that spot.
Which is tough.
And all of a sudden, the the depth finder manufacturers came out with an ability to hit a button, GPS. And I thought that was so great. At first, it was. I mean, it was a game changer because now everybody had the ability to just go beep, beep, and GPS was huge, huge. Yeah. And that's just me fishing locally in the Southeast. I can't imagine, the places Pete's fished.
Well, it's so funny because not everybody could triangulate. And by triangulation, I mean, you line two trees up or you line a tree up and a pole up, and you have to get them a certain way. And then you go at a 90-degree angle, and you line two things up this way.
Yeah.
Now, one guy would think triangulation was, I marked it, I see you got a tree over here and a house over here. You have to line two objects or more up this way, and then 90 degrees this way. And that's the only way you can triangulate. But not everybody could do that, and it was a big secret. You didn't just go tell your buddy how to triangulate.
Especially not with the wind blowing 15, 20 miles an hour.
That's right. And people, I still remember marks, what we call marks on holes, with triangulation marks on holes. And whenever they came out with the GPSs, all of a sudden a guy could go doop, and he's there. So that killed all the guys that used to ledge fish. And now all of a sudden everybody can do that. And they can ride by you. and mark a mark. Not only can they do that, just like, they've become community holes now, but just like when I was on Pickwick, with the contour mapping that they have now, and I know you're probably going to talk about that.
Lead us there.
You can ride by a fella and you can see what he's fishing because you look at your map and there's a point coming out underwater right there, and then all you got to go is doom, and you got his spot right there, boom, that fast.
And am I right that I'll play the role of that guy? If I then recognize that it's Pete Pons on that spot, or Larry Pugh, or Jim Long, or someone like that on that spot, 100%. Now I'm coming back.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Don't 100%. Think we didn't know certain people that were coming by hitting the waypoint twice because it was Jim or Randy Haynes on Pickwick
or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean,
or Pete in a wrapped boat.
My boat's wrapped in a bright green, and thank goodness I have TDJ sponsorship. I'm telling you, but they all voted on it there. I had no choice about and if I could have chosen a little bit more discreet color, I might have done it. But anyway, it's beside the point. But to answer your question, yes, and therefore, when you go through Pickwick, it's not about, if you're ledge fishing, it's the cycle that you're going to get to fish the ledges, not where the ledges are anymore because of those problems.
There's no secrets. There's no secrets. And the one thing we did enjoy on Pickwick specifically, or maybe Bay Springs, typical offshore places for us, I've never fished offshore on Barnett, is seeing how our waypoints, which we had created, how they lined up on the maps that either Navionics or Lake Master, Navionics first, how they were laid out. Because we knew what we were fishing, but to see it on the map, it was like, there's a shell. We knew it was a shell bed. We called it the shell bed, but it stuck out like a sore thumb on that map.
Yeah.
And no more having to triangulate, throwing out a little orange.
No.
Buoy.
Well, now the buoys, I still use the buoys. I'm so old school, because I'll get down through there, and the maps, even though they're good maps, they're not always accurate because the contour of the bottom is constantly changing, especially on the river system, because it blows sand around. Well, they can't keep up with it. I would say when they produced the map, it was probably right. But sometimes they're off. And that's right now, that's the key. When you find those little hidden spots that are not on the map, then your money. That's it. That's very key.
Years ago, I got to spend a little bit of time in a boat with Timmy Horton. We grew up together up in North Alabama.
Yeah.
And I thought he knew magic somehow, that he could watch that little thing spinning around in a circle and not only know how deep the water was, but know what we were over and where and what kind of from that to now screens, I guess, close to as big as this computer.
22 inches.
And you can see it clear as day in bright sun.
Yeah. What technology they have. And that's one of the reasons they cost so much, honestly, is because you look at that, you can see that screen better than you can see your phone screen. And you can hit it with a piece of lead or something, and most of the time it's going to survive it. The screens that we're talking about now, they've got a new screen out, and I'm not very familiar with it, but I do know that I just looked at them, 22 inches, and I'm like, how in the world that thing survive up in the front of the boat? Think about it. That's big. It's huge, like a TV. The guy told me, he said, man, don't tell anybody this, but you could actually stand on that and fish. And so they make them durable. They make them, but I'm telling you, you're running on the Great Lakes and it's 7-8 mile an hour wind. Dude, it is unbelievable the punishment that boat goes through and your equipment goes through. I've seen trolling motors jerked off. I mean, depth finders, it's just unbelievable that the punishment that those things go through.
You mentioned the Great Lakes. I was thinking that a minute ago. All this stuff kind of combined, whether it's GPS technology, maps, sonar, those types of things. In a tournament, going to a place that's 5 states away, and you're going to have a little bit of time to practice and all that kind of stuff. I'm just imagining the difference that would make now versus what you had to do 25 years ago, 30 years ago.
It's night and day. It's not even the same. It's not even a comparison because you have such a immense amount of resources that you can use, the internet, the mapping systems, there's just so much. Fishing reports. Of course, you never know when someone's telling the truth, but you do get a general idea. So now doing your homework before you go fish a tournament is more important than it's ever been. Used to, it was not near as important. You kind of went by the feel, went by the seat of your pants, and generally all the lakes in that region would be the same. We'd start out in the south and move to the north as the weather permitted, because they wanted to because it would ice up. You wouldn't be able to launch your boat. But as you move further north, you're basically doing the same thing you did when you left Florida. Okay. So then when you finally get up to Lake Erie in July, the fish are spawning up there. So you're doing the same thing you were doing back in Florida 3-4 months ago. That's how those guys get so efficient on finding fish and stuff like that. Back in the day, it was the same thing. In this circuit that I'm fishing now, the NPFL, they're doing a little different. We haven't had but 2 tournaments. We're going to fish all the way through the fall. We'll be fishing during starting of dove season. I'll be coming back from Michigan, so I'm a little worried that I'm going to get back in time.
In time to go dove hunting?
Yeah.
Is it the 1 year? I mean, it's a calendar year season?
We fish all the way through October.
Okay. No splits or nothing. This is the 2024 NPFL.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Very interesting.
I've started getting a little interest in it, especially when I heard they were coming to Pickwick, sort of follow what's going on.
Yeah.
So I guess I need to get on there and see where else you're going to be fishing. Sort of follow it.
Well, we were discussing earlier, and we said something about it. These guys are young. They're 2 years, going on 3 years old, and they're hungry, and they appreciate you. And dude, I've never fished a circuit, and I fished them all. I fished bass, I fished Major League Fishing, I fished FLW, fished them all, but I've never fished one where tournament morning there's somebody that comes out there, gets in your truck, launches you, and goes and parks your truck for you. And this organization's doing
Come
that.
on.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
Huh. Do you have a marshal?
You
Or do
have
you fish by yourself, or is it
no,
draw?
you fish by yourself.
Okay.
But the way they eliminate that is you're required to have a camera on board, which you've got your GoPro, which everybody has now.
Yeah.
And then they randomly give lie detector tests, not just to the winter, but they randomly give it throughout the thing. And so anytime they request a video, then you give them your SD card, they review it and make sure you didn't do anything wrong. And they're strict. They have rules, but they do what they're supposed to do. Yeah. I mean, there was a guy that got disqualified because he didn't have a fishing license. He won the tournament, $100,000, and the tournament director said, "Let me see your fishing license." He said, "Sir, I just forgot. I am so sorry." And they disqualified the man. Well, and that's what they should have done.
Yeah, right. No doubt.
I mean, I feel sorry for the guy.
Well,
probably.
It's an expensive learning
lesson. He will never do that again. But I mean, you talking about a 20, 30, whatever it is. I don't know. Some of them are $60 to buy a fishing license.
Where you're at. Yeah.
But dadgum, man. I mean, the amount of money and expense that you have going into that, buy your fishing license. Because that's not hard.
You mentioned that term, finding fish.
Yes, sir.
Going here, there, all across the country and finding fish. And I just can close my eyes and imagine, that time when you would maybe fishing off of a point, throwing a Carolina rig, and you figured they were there, but you wondered if they're there.
Yeah.
Now, 2024, you look down on the screen and you see that they're there.
Live.
You see them moving around, see your bait, all that. So the finding fish versus now fishing and knowing they're there.
Fascinating. It's fascinating, to
Yes.
say the least. A lot of people, and you're talking about forward-facing sonar, and there's a lot of discussion about it, guys. I know there's a lot of discussion about it, and a lot of people are discussing it because it makes them popular. It makes their channel, get hits. Everybody's talking about, no, I don't want it. Yes, I want it. Well, I can see both sides of it. I really can. I think it's a fascinating tool. I enjoy it immensely. It turns my fishing into hunting because I can see them. And just because you can see them doesn't mean you can catch them, Matt. I'm telling you.
100%. I learned that on his boat that day.
You might throw 300 to 400 times to catch 6 or 7 fish. Because I can, and so what's going on is you see fish. First, you got to distinguish whether this fish is a carp, a crappie, a bass, a bait fish, because it all looks the same.
Yeah.
And all that starts factoring in so many variables. Not only do you have to line your cast up to where you can see the fish, you have to be able to produce your cast out there the right distance, but your wind's blowing your boat and your lure's moving and the fish is moving. So you're trying to touch 3 different things. And when you get all that just right, he might not bite it.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't. It might not be a bass or it might not be a crappie or what. And some of the younger guys, now I don't know why it's just the younger guys, but they are so much better at it than us older guys. One of the things that I believe the reason that is because, and Hank has said this and a lot of other guys, they don't have any other options. So when I get out there and I'm fishing in a tournament and I'm fishing for $100,000 and I say, well, I'm going to fish with forward-facing sonar and it starts working a little bit, or I catch 1 fish or 2 fish, in my mind, I start saying, man, I remember when I caught him over there on that grass bed, dude, I guarantee you I can catch a keeper over there on that grass bed. Boom, I'm gone. Yeah. I'm up and gone. This young guy, he knows no other technique. No. So that's what he's going to do all day long. And he has no variances of that. Either he's very successful or he's not successful at all. Yeah. You look at those guys, whenever they do good, they do real good. And when they do bad, they do real bad.
Well, I was telling somebody this morning, this weekend was the perfect contrast of sonar, livescope versus no livescope. So you had one tournament organization, BASS, on the James River. Yeah. You had another tournament. No, BASS was on Smith Lake. Yeah. Okay. FLW was on the James River. James River is a tidal fishery. Skeet Reese won it, throwing a shallow square bill.
Yeah, that was Major League Fishing.
And 2 feet of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Smith Lake, on the opposite, 200 feet deep in places, it was a live scope event. Everybody you saw, and I mean, they did a great job. There were people, texting me, looking at showing the screen on live TV, Saturday morning, watching the bait. They'd never seen it, watching a bait go down to a school of spotted bass. So, quite the contrast in styles of fishing. And, the question always comes up from the fishing standpoint, not the science standpoint or the biology standpoint, is should you outlaw it in tournaments?
In tournaments.
In tournaments.
And that's really the crux of the issue that comes up because it's a tournament issue, right? I mean, mainly in terms of controversy. It's a tournament issue.
I say put on your big boy britches and learn how to do it. That's what I say. That's what I'm telling you. I mean, I can learn just like anybody can, but I do understand their thoughts on that. It's a hard thing to say. I can tell you this: if you eliminate it from one circuit, like just say Bassmaster says, okay, no more forward-facing sonar, you know what's going to happen?
They're all going to.
They're going to go somewhere else. All the young guys are going to go somewhere else that they can catch them, and the old guy, it's going to be an old man circuit. Okay, and those old men are going to die.
Yeah.
And the young men are going to take over. And that's life.
Yeah.
But
so
you can schedule it.
To do it.
But you can schedule. Take this case this weekend. You could hypothetically set your tournament schedule that would be a combination, I guess. That wouldn't give one group an advantage over another. Could you not?
Yeah, you could. But I'm going to tell you, the guys that are going to, if you had a chance to win $100,000, and you were paying a $5,000 entry fee, and the circuit said, okay, Larry, and you were good at live scoping, and said, Larry, we're not going to restrict you on this side. And then you go over to this other side, their competitor, and they said, we're going to restrict 3 of the tournaments, but 3 of them we're going to let you use live scope. You're going to choose the one that's no restriction.
There's no restriction.
And not only what I'm talking about, but you take, Lowrance, Garmin, all of them, there's big money in this. You think about how much money we're spending on that equipment now, which I know everybody says, well, I can't afford it, Well, that's part of it.
Sure it is.
I mean, I have got friends that have resisted it because he didn't want to spend the $1,500, $2,000, whatever it is. Yeah. And he's like, he sent me a video this morning and he said, man, I can't stand it anymore. I got to go buy one.
You got to do it.
Well, these companies know that,
Well, and isn't there, if we back up and look at the issue from a little higher altitude, isn't there room at the table for this in the discussion? Fishing is not just about tournament fishing.
Absolutely not.
Okay, I'm a dad.
Yeah.
And if I've got that in the budget, the difference in taking my little girl fishing and wondering if we're making good casts versus knowing we're throwing at fish, she's got a chance to catch one. That may be worth that cost to me, and I may never give a flip about a tournament. Or let's say a guide who's somebody pays him a lot of money to come and they bring 2 kids or bring their granddad who's never caught a smallmouth at Pickwick.
Yeah.
And that's going to help him be able to deliver that experience. That's part of this conversation too, isn't it?
It is. It certainly is. And you can make the argument against forward face sonar because all you're doing is staring at a screen. You're not looking at the nature. You don't see that eagle fly by and you don't see this. But there's a happy medium in there. I
think so too.
And there's also, we worry about fisheries, okay?
Yeah.
And you being, a biologist and a game warden, I assume you're still a game warden. You worry about, are we going to catch all the fish? Are we going to catch all the crappie?
That's a good question. And I think back with fondness of our overreaction to the Alabama rig.
Yeah.
And we had legitimate concerns over it when it first came out because we really thought, and I'm not talking about Mississippi, I'm talking about a meeting of all Southeast states, will the Alabama rig damage bass fisheries? And we decided to be very cautious. Some tournament organizations banned it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a little quick. So I say this. I'm definitely a fan of forward-facing sonar. I'm getting to see the underwater world from a fishing standpoint and from a biology standpoint in terms of studying fish behavior. Where we find them now just blows my mind, particularly big fish, trophy fish, the way they act like a big buck. But what I'm also seeing in the 3 years that I've heavily used it is they're getting harder to catch with it. Even the crappie, bass. I told somebody this weekend, if that fish gets inside 20 feet, you'll never catch it because they hear boat slap, the noise that they hear. I think the sonar ping.
Yeah.
So I would like to see the tournament organizations and folks, and I think they're going to be cautious, and nobody's going to step out there and just completely ban it because I've just seen in a year fish starting to adapt. Jokingly on that Smith Lake tournament, there was a guy that caught 103 bass. And the way I was seeing those spotted bass react on that livescope, I texted a friend of mine. I said, nobody's been scoping these fish. They're acting like some of these fish that we fished for 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They hadn't been bothered because they were acting like it was when it was a lot of fun. And it's getting tougher. Now, is it still so cool? Yes, you saw it.
Yeah,
I finally showed it to you. And I don't know if Pete's seeing the same kind of thing. That's me crappie fishing a lot because I love crappie fish now, and bass fishing also.
100%. I mean, you can, and we're actually doing things. But what he's talking about is when you turn that sonar around and you put it on that fish. It's like if you do that enough, if you slap a guy's hand enough, he's finally going to go, hey, I don't need you. Every time he rings that bell, I get hurt. I don't need that. And he starts swimming the other way. And they're doing that.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now is turn it around till you see them, and then you turn it off of them and make you cast. You know what I'm saying? Because you can see where they're on brush tops or stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But again, you don't always know it's a bass. You don't always know it's a catfish or whatever it is. There's a challenge there. And this is a whole new world of fishing. It really is.
And this is what I learned too. When Larry said to me, okay, Matt, 40 feet in front of the boat, 12 feet deep.
Yeah.
And I got a spinning rod, which I throw a bait caster a lot more than a spinning rod. And a little bitty light.
Ultralight.
And the wind blowing just a little bit. I found out that just because he tells me where the fish is doesn't mean I can make a cast to that fish.
That's right. It's not all, and again, it's guys, I'm just saying that you can throw, crappie fishing I throw with a spinning rod and I've turned it, and this thing has made me a crappie fish. I like crappie fishing too because I throw a spinning rod, I feel that tick and it feels
same thing,
like
me too.
And so I might throw it, say 30 of them and get one to follow.
Yeah.
So think about that. You do it 30, there he is right there, throw it, let it fall down, try to make them line up. There's so many variables. It is not an easy task. It's not, okay, I see him, there he is, oop, there's one, there's one. Now, I will say this, a lot of the guys are taking the 18-foot poles and stuff like that and hanging that jig right out the front of the boat, and they're moving their boat up there to it, and they've got brakes now. They got trolling motors on their power poles.
Yeah. Crappie brakes.
Stop them.
Yeah.
And back up.
Another game changer.
Go forward. There's so much to that. But I like casting at them. It's a little more challenge to me. But I can also throw a longer distance. I can throw 40, 50 feet out there and catch that fish, which I feel like it's more rewarding. But it's like I said, it's making it, turning it from hunting to fishing. And then you get that boy whenever you do good, because you get to fish in.
Yeah.
It's something.
Does something like this, even though it can be labeled as controversial, it can because it's polarizing.
Yeah.
Does it actually emphasize and maybe even help grow the sport of fishing?
100%.
I agree.
100%.
I agree.
We got guys that are 19 and 20 years old making $100,000 in a tournament that would have never even thought about that before. There's no way.
I agree.
I mean,
the high school fishermen that we're seeing are anglers, because don't think this is male dominated anymore. You look at some of the high schools that are putting teams out there in Mississippi, and there's female anglers.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing, and as that transitions into college, it's growing leaps and bounds. And I think it would even grow more, if you had people that would be what they call a boat captain. There are more and more kids that want to do it. There's just not enough adults out there to volunteer their time to do it. So I think it's a direct result of the generation coming up that's so familiar with. They look at the screen and it's nothing new to them, It's probably just, video game. It's another video game to them. And I've seen them. They sit down there with the head down looking at that screen all day long.
Yeah. You can argue the fact, though, that we're losing, like Hank said, and if you haven't heard that podcast, you probably need to listen to it. It's pretty interesting.
I have.
We're losing a generation of people that understand the outdoors and hear brim sucking on lily pads and hear and see deer doing this and da 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 da, and we're losing that. But I think there's going to come a time to where we might actually kind of skip a generation when it comes to that. But then I think it's going to evolve back around.
Come back around.
Because I don't think this forward-facing sonar is going to be the end-all.
No.
Who knows what the future is going to hold.
Well, I was going to ask you, and I'm sure Matt was, where does this go next? We've talked about boats and motors and rod and reels and tackle and line and electronics and trolling motors and batteries. What's next?
I got chills because I'm thinking about my dad. My dad's 90 years old. He'll be 91 in a month. Yeah. And I carried him out there on the boat with me, and I showed him that forward-facing sonar, and he just giggled like a 5-year-old. He's just like, I can't believe it. Yeah. I can't believe it. And I can think of maybe my son carrying me out there, somebody carrying me out there and showing me what the next thing is. I mean, who knows? Who would have thought, 70, 100 years ago that you'd be able to put something in a box, push a button, and it'd be so hot you couldn't touch it in less than a minute.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll tell you what'll be next. It'll be a computer that monitors everything around your boat, and then Alexa will tell you exactly
how to
what
catch it,
rod, reel, and bait, and everything to use.
Well, I honestly think that they're going to. Probably the next immediate step would be able to distinguish what type fish it is.
Oh. And I think that's coming using artificial intelligence. Chip mentioned that. I've got enough scope time, as I like to call it, and I know Pete does. We can come close. Yeah. I know bait fish. I know what shad look like. Generally speaking, I can probably guess if it's a crappie, especially if they're schooling up, if it's a big bass. But it's a guess. Yeah. It's still a guess. And I think I'm hearing things that there are going to be some technology advancements that are going to narrow down what that species.
Yeah,
that's what that fish is.
That'll be interesting. There's going to become another problem in the equation as that progresses that we haven't even thought of yet.
Yep.
You know, there's always something, and it's challenging, or we wouldn't like it.
Right.
If you went out there fishing and caught one every cast, you'd get tired of it. Let's go home.
Right.
I don't know. I introduced him to that a couple of months ago. He didn't get tired of it.
Yeah.
5 hours of it. My arm was tired after it. I promise you that.
Well, I'm ready to go.
wasn't tired of it.
When we go, I want to go to that place. Yeah.
Yeah, they're out there. Thanks to our biologists and MDWFP and our state lakes. It's great. That was one heck of a day on a state lake.
Yeah.
So, Pete, all these things, and so I'm kind of taking it back to the playground. Your personal best. What's the biggest one you've ever caught?
Oh, bass?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. It's not that big. It's 11.5 pounds.
Not that big.
Not that big.
I caught that this is when I was young in Johns, Mississippi, on a farm pond, and I caught it on a jig.
Right.
So there you go. You don't have to. All the fish I've caught all over the United States, Mississippi produced the biggest one for me. So, it's not always about the equipment that you have and all that. And it's still fun to go to that farm pond and walk around the bank and make that cast and get that big old explosion on that popar or whatever it is, devil's horse.
I was going to ask you too, and I know you've been asked this a bunch, your favorite way to catch them, favorite technique.
I love to throw a crankbait, but who can argue with a topwater? Who can argue with a frog? Dude, I love it all. Yeah. I mean, I love it all. There's something that's got me on it. Yeah. It's like my wife told me. I mean, you have a sociably acceptable addiction. And you laugh, but it's not, she's not kidding. I mean, it is truly an addiction for me. I think about it almost 24 hours a day. Almost every minute I'm thinking about how I can catch a fish, and I fish a lot.
He's that way too.
Let me follow up. And I thought this is where Matt was going. So I always love whether it's, Paul Elias or, anybody I have the chance to interact with or Matt does. You fished all over the United States.
Yeah.
What's your favorite lake that you fished a tournament on?
You talking about scenery-wise or catching fish-wise?
No, both. Not. I mean, is
Can
there
I
a
have
lake?
two?
You can sure, because I may ask you what's your least favorite.
Well, I can tell you that one.
That came quick, didn't it?
Yeah.
What's your favorite lake?
Favorite would be Falcon Lake down in South Texas.
Okay.
It's not a very scenic place.
I heard that from Mr. Elias.
It's kind of a mud hole.
Yeah.
But then the next would be up in New York, St. Lawrence.
St. Lawrence River.
Yeah,
I went there.
I've stayed up there a month and a half fishing before.
Isn't it incredible?
It's just an incredible place, and it's a good. If you haven't gone up there and fished, when I take my sponsors fishing, and I told them, I said, and there's some coon asses, they love that. But anyway, they said, I said we need to go to New York fishing. He said, New York, why New York? I said, just go up there with me one time. And we've been up there almost every year since.
What time of the year do y'all go?
A little after July.
Okay. So it's postponed.
So what type of fishing are we talking about? Largemouth, smallmouth?
Smallmouth, mainly smallmouth, but the largemouth are so easy to catch up there. You just go into a pocket and pick a frog up, throw it out there.
If the wind gets up, and Pete's been there a lot more than I have, but if the wind gets up, which it will, if you're there a week, or let's say we fish 6 days, there's going to be a day or two we can't get out. We'll go and fish largemouth fishing and take a frog. And I was like, I almost felt guilty. I can't believe this.
They're easy to catch. They really are. But they don't fish for them like we do. I fish out of Buffalo, New York, which is right by Niagara Falls. Yeah. And we were having a BASS Elite Series tournament there, and I had a guy walk up to me and says, "What are y'all fishing for?"
Walleye.
And I said, and they're all walleye fish.
They all walleye.
Think we're idiots. But he said, "Bass? What are you fishing for bass for? That's trash fish."
How about that?
And so they have a different opinion. Some of them do, not all. Yeah. But it's becoming more and more popular.
Starting to see more and more people.
Very rapidly up there. St. Lawrence River is, put it on your bucket list.
That's what I tell everybody.
I promise you. And you ask what kind, you're going to smallmouth fish, but you can catch them several different ways. But you can actually bottom fish. So you can take a weight, put it on the bottom, and your little lure up here and drift and bounce it off the bottom and boom, and catch smallmouth doing that. Anybody can do it.
Awesome.
It stays frozen, 3 or 4 months out of the year.
That's right.
Okay.
So before everybody gets to hollering that Mississippi doesn't do a good job of managing their fisheries like New York,
Yeah.
these fish, they have a season, it's iced up, so
That's right.
it's they don't get a lot of pressure like we get 12
That's
months
right.
out of the year.
That's exactly right.
That's what he said. They don't fish them like
Yeah.
we do here.
Least favorite, real quick, least favorite. As long as it's not
Fort
Mississippi.
Gibson.
Huh?
Fort
Fort Gibson in
Gibson.
Oklahoma. Is that on Arkansas River?
It's close.
I'm not,
Tommy Biffle's backyard.
It's one of those navigation systems. Yeah, I've heard of it.
What
I've
type
never
of
been
place
there.
is it?
It's
Deep,
a
clear?
reservoir. No, it's
Okay.
it's a
Shallow.
pretty shallow impoundment.
Okay.
And I gave it a hard rap because one of the times that I went there in the BASS, we couldn't. I mean, like 4 pounds caught. Did
Ooh.
good. Up in Iowa, same thing. Only place I ever saw Kevin zero
In
was up
Iowa.
I think it was in Iowa on the
Okay.
river.
Yeah.
Maybe Mississippi River in Iowa. Does it? I mean, I'm not even
Yeah.
sure.
Not sure.
Yeah, probably so. One of the pools.
But
I
yeah,
don't
I was-
know. Or Missouri. I don't know.
It's funny how he described it though. Place gets a bad rap if Kevin Van Dam can't catch one.
That's a different
that's good.
place.
Oh, is it
Another. But it was a tough fishery. But now it's come around a long ways since then, and just like Mississippi, they have people working on it, and restocking it, and so you can't really say that anymore.
Well, Pete, I know it is for Larry. I'm not speaking for him. It's a real pleasure for me to get to meet you. I've been a fan for a long time. I've watched you on TV. I've read about you in the magazines growing up. So to get to sit and talk to you is a real cool thing. And just can't thank you enough for giving us your time and your thoughts. I hope we get to do it again soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much, and I enjoyed getting to talk to both of you guys. Yeah. I've always looked up to Larry. I never told him, but he's a good guy and very, very fair and does the right thing,
Yep.
And Matt, I know you are too. Same deal. So I enjoyed it.
Well, I know that Larry's got the most hole-in-ones of anybody at
Why
this
do we
table.
always go back to golf?
Anybody that displays his hole-in-one golf balls in his office, we need to bring that up.
There's something going on there.
Every time you got to bring that up.
I look up to you as a fisherman, as a golfer as well. I'm still looking for that first
Well,
hole-in-one.
Yeah, well, it's golf season right now.
It sure is.
All right.
Pete, thanks so much.
Yep.
Great to
Enjoyed
talk to you, Larry.
Always,
a real
Matt.
pleasure as always. And thanks for listening and watching the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. We'll see you outdoors.